Welcome back to Honest Voice. I'm Todd.
I'm Carolsue. Thanks for joining us today. So today, the title of the episode is The Lie That Is Eating Our Relationships.
Yeah.
And we know this title got your attention for a reason. And today we're going to tell you exactly what that lie is and why it's costing us more than we realize.
Yeah, this one's going to be sort of a sensitive topic for a lot of people. It might be good to maybe watch this one privately. If you do have a lot of conflict in your household, review it first and then decide if you want others to view along with it, because there are going to be some sensitive communication topics in here. It's not like 18 plus or anything. It's
Right.
just these are going to be sensitive subjects, which you've basically been talking about all along. And if any point that you feel like you're getting irritated with the information yourself, or you're getting bothered by the content, we beg you to try to stick with us.
Yeah, push through. Absolutely push through, because this is the moment that we're actually here to work through. Because in so many situations, as soon as somebody gets uncomfortable, the conversation stops. And sometimes that's where progress stops. So we want to push through the feelings that we're having. We're going to explore them and figure out better ways to communicate.
Yeah, remember, this is all data. And, we really want to push. We're not doing it from a shaming perspective. But if you're getting mad at the TV set or at your phone because of the people that are talking on it, we beg you to consider that as an issue that you need to explore. That's exactly what we're asking you to do. Explore those feelings, because we should be able to watch or read anything without actually provoking an emotional response to that.
Yeah. So this episode's going to pull together everything we've already been building toward. And if you've been following our previous episodes, A, thank you. B, we'll use this episode to tie a lot of those themes together. And it's the picture that you can only see once you stand back from all the different pieces, the topics that we've already discussed at length.
Absolutely. We're going to pull together basically everything that we've been going over, and we're going to show how we've been building.
Yes.
Show after show.
Yes.
I mean, it's two things. We're saying building an armor, but it's really heavy baggage that we're carrying around that's weighing us down. And we get stuck in these perceptions. We get stuck in these ideas that really prevent growth.
Yes.
And we don't notice it because, like we say, first of all, we used to do all these things.
Sure.
So, except the real egregious bad things, they're not looking for us on America's Most Wanted or anything like that.
No.
Yeah. So it's the stuff that happens inside households that contribute to dysfunction and contribute to a lot of chaos. We're basically identifying those things and asking people to consider them. All we're saying is consider the information that we're giving you and see how you can use that to improve your life. But at least we got the information out. And I do want to stress also, it's real easy to get defensive with some of this information yourself and try to put a label on it so you can justify that it's wrong. This is not about politics.
No.
This is not about shaming anyone for having boundaries. This is talking about cultural habits that we're not even aware of anymore. Like we've gone so far into this that it's become so normalized, especially after the pandemic, where we were basically in a vacuum of coping skills that we weren't using, and we were actually making ourselves worse. There's a lot of data and research to support what's called neuroplasticity in the brain. I almost didn't say that right.
But you did.
I got it out. It's more than 12 syllables. It's very tough for me. But neuroplasticity that supports that, we can actually rewire our brain. So a lot of the things that are frustrating us, that feel like it's instantaneous, it feels like it's the way we are, our makeup, personality traits, and things like that, are actually very learned behaviors that become so commonplace and so embedded that we think it's part of our makeup.
Yeah.
But we're living proof that if you work on these things, and like we said, the 3 phases, you'll mess up again. It's okay.
Yeah.
And then you'll catch yourself in the middle, and then of course you'll think about it before you actually start talking. And that's where you make that progression and your behavior starts changing. And then you practice it over time, and you will see that it will actually rewire your brain. You will stop having that knot in your stomach or that tightness in your chest when someone brings up certain subjects, and you'll realize they're just talking.
Yeah.
That's all it is, just words. It's not an attack. I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to try to convince them that what they're saying is wrong. It's just a difference of opinion, and it's just an interaction.
Yeah. I also don't need to internalize it immediately just because somebody identified it. It doesn't necessarily make it true. So what we want to do is a quick recap of some of the topics we've covered already, because what we've discovered is that there's a thread underneath all of these topics that ties them all together. And that's what we'll talk about today. So some of the things that we've discussed in past episodes, the words that shape us. We talked about the language that we use to communicate. Arguably a very important part of communication is the language we use. Right?
Yeah, and a lot of that's generational. It came from parents of parents of parents and has been passed down without question, but we have identified that it can be very damaging.
Yeah. All right. Another one of our episodes focused on dysfunctional communications. These are the patterns that we inherit and repeat without realizing it.
And that's the one I was actually talking about
with the
for the last
generational
one.
stuff. Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, that one.
That one right there.
Yeah.
We also covered the cost of silence, what never gets said, and the damage that's done when we withhold certain conversations.
Yeah. And then men and women's communication, we talked about the differences. We mentioned in previous episodes how we show up with a facade. We have these rules that we've created based on other failures, things that we've identified as failures. Then we put those particular failures on the next person we meet. So we're putting all this baggage that we have on other people. And then we're deciding in those moments with a fake facade and a bunch of baggage caused by somebody else that they're not a good person to pursue in a relationship. And those are all false notions. Even the baggage that we put on them is created by us.
Yeah.
You know, we've identified these things as I'm never going to deal with that again. And we don't realize that for maybe the last person, it was a red flag, but maybe for this person, it's a massive gap in their overall understanding or training.
Yeah.
Or experience is probably a better word. Their experience growing up that they've never been in those situations. And sometimes it's as easy as saying, you know, that sort of offends me when you say that way. It makes me feel dismissed, or it makes me feel like you don't see me as a person. And they're like, oh my gosh, I never want to do that again. And you've now actually cleared a red flag.
That's right.
And we're not saying it's your responsibility to shape, educate, train, be a therapist for a significant other, but these are the communication styles that we've worked on that have bridged that gap.
How what we say lands differently than we think. We are big believers in the difference between intention and impact, and we've talked about that in previous shows.
Yeah, that has a big deal.
Yes. So we've also covered coping skills, and that's managing our own internal responses to external things like something somebody else says to us or an uncomfortable moment in a relationship, and how that impacts our growth within these relationships.
Yeah, and I want to add, and you think about this, I've mentioned a few times that I am on the spectrum, and we say these things not as a badge or anything like that. We say it because we are proactively reducing the stigma around a lot of terms. So when we talk about mental illness, we go deep, and a lot of people might say, well, they're just disclosing a little bit too much today or something like that. But we don't believe there is a limit to what we could disclose unless it hurts somebody. Yeah. That's why we said in the previous episode, if you're teaching your kids about events, make sure you also teach them about this is not something that they should talk to their peers about.
Yes.
Let their parents educate them. So there are just certain areas that we really don't believe, especially in our relationship, that there is any taboo conversation. Yeah. So from the social perspective, it seems like maybe what we're doing is a little overzealous, but it's only overzealous because society has made it that way. This should just be normal conversation. So I bring it up because I sometimes have a very robotic approach. I will add a little bit of background to those that have autism is that one of the things that a lot of autistic people use is what's called masking. So throughout my life, and I didn't even know I was doing this until I got my diagnosis, is one of the things that we do is that when we get punished, we immediately catalog it and say, okay, don't say that word anymore. So then we program ourselves to not say that word. So we end up becoming this almost like socially created robot of not doing all the bad things that we've gotten in trouble for. So that's called masking, because I am constantly thinking when I talk, is this going to make them angry? Is this going to upset them? And then, of course, because of the trauma background, I'm constantly examining body language. I'm constantly looking at how somebody responds. So I walk through life with a mild paranoia about almost everything that I say. You know, is it right? Is it going to offend somebody? Because I don't always recognize that, but I do work on it very hard.
You do.
Yeah,
you definitely do.
I couldn't think of a better word for
That's
it.
a good word.
But yeah, I work on it almost painstakingly because this is a communication podcast, and I was in a communication specialty for my job. So I had to learn those nuances. And I think that's why I took to CIT, because this identified like why the masks exist and how communication was not always my fault that things got out of hand. It was people's sensitivities, people's biases, people's social background, cultural background that made them think that what I was saying was offensive in the moment. So I just wanted to sort of put out that autistic PSA right there as to why sometimes you may hear me, well, you just need to stop doing that.
Yeah, and here's an example of how it shows up in relationships in a way that's not in any way damaging. But in our last episode, we talked a little bit about, we were telling stories about clothing choices and giving opinions and telling the truth when someone asks you, how does this dress look on me? And
exactly.
One of the things that is part of your particular spectrum disorder is that there are certain patterns that make Todd's brain sort of misfire. So if I wear non-symmetrical stripes or shapes or something, or if the collar is a little longer over here and shorter over here, that's the first thing his brain notices is that pattern. And it doesn't make sense in his brain. So it's like, the stripes are wrong. The stripes are not symmetrical. It's not symmetrical. And, and if I didn't know him, I might decide that that was offensive to me.
Exactly.
But in speaking honestly back and forth and him telling me how the spectrum disorder flows into his language, that helps me understand that that's just him sharing with me honestly what he observes. There's no there's no like value right or wrong to it. It's just, it's the first thing he noticed. It's asymmetrical.
Yeah. And the masking aspect of it is my brain says, don't say that out loud.
So it's very commendable that we're at a point where you do feel like you can say that to me.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there are lots of places where you wouldn't tell somebody that their clothes are asymmetrical.
Yeah, I do call our home a sanctuary because I don't have to watch my words. It's almost like the facade when you walk in the door, even though I'm always in the door now that I'm retired. But when you walk in the door, you can just sort of take off that suit and be who you are. I get to stay who I am all the time. But the point actually that I was making full circle.
Yeah, good job.
Is that with coping skills, if you feel that irritation, that to me is an identification of where you could cope better. Because I honestly believe that there should be no words that provoke us. I mean, two guys in the bar where it's like, I hate this team and this team sucks, and be like, oh yeah, I get you. And that's it, instead of, oh, what are you talking about? All that stuff I just believe just really should not exist at all. And that gets layered down into just simplistic kind of things that we've already brought up about things we don't talk about in the house.
Right.
Why not? Let's get it out of the way so it's not something to tiptoe, because what I see is eggshells. Anything you can't talk about, just look at your whole environment as I have to walk on eggshells. And what ultimately can I do to sweep up those eggshells so they don't exist in my environment anymore?
Another previous episode, we talked a lot about self-awareness, how we can't fix what we don't see in our own communication and behavior. So all of these previous episodes, when we're looking through them, we start to see a pattern developing and a thread that connects them all. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And that thread is, and we sort of alluded to it already. I talked about that one supervisor who, even mentioning a better way, offended that person because they immediately go to this mentality of, you're making it sound like what I was doing was wrong. Well, in some cases it's true, and you should want that information so you can now do it right, especially if you're in a leadership position. You should want to provide the best culture, the best environment, the best working environment for your staff. And that includes making corrections, making improvements where it makes people's lives easier. So the bottom line here is that society has made even the idea of improvement offensive.
Yes.
And that feeds into a lot of things, like when you see people putting down education, that's improvement. And usually that's coming from people who don't want you to know more than they do. And instead of them doing the work, they just want to shut down everybody around them. And this happens a lot. And I'm not calling people out for that, because even those behaviors have been put on them. Those are the ways that they have learned to navigate the world to where they feel the most comfortable themselves. And some of them get really good at shutting other people down. They get very proficient at it, but it doesn't make it right. And over time, it becomes so normalized that we think their way is the right way and our way is wrong.
Yeah. And it's that right and wrong, I think, that locks us up so much. So it's come to a point now, we've realized, where pointing out a problem makes me the problem. So never mind that I might be sitting in a committee meeting and I notice that all the committee members are, instead of all engaging in discussion, they're on their phones, they're disconnected, they're having side conversations. If I'm the one who says, hey, can we all bring our attention back to the speaker, then the immediate reaction is that I am the problem for identifying that.
There's a byproduct that I was just thinking about while we were talking. Part of the problem also, I believe, is the call outs. we have created a society where pointing out the problem is the problem, but also the way people point out the problem sometimes makes it very ineffective. You know, we talk about receptivity, we talk about prepping, we talk about making the other person want to hear our information. And a lot of people don't do that. And we see this a lot. And we're going to be talking more about this as Pride Month comes up next month when we get into our shame lecture. A lot of people in those situations, when you see people that are uncomfortable with other lifestyles, and then the person in that lifestyle says, well, you're a homophobe or you're a transphobe, that doesn't help anybody evolve. And that's one of the things that we're saying. We're not taking a side. We're not trying to point out any kind of, well, I guess we are taking a side when it comes to being kind.
Right.
You know, we just think that there's a better way to do that where you actually bring people over rather than just point out their flaw or your perceived identification of a behavior and actually saying, what is it that's bothering you about my lifestyle? Maybe we can bridge this gap. And I really think that the naysayers, you would put them in, and I don't mean this as if this is what you want to do, but you put them in a very uncomfortable position because now they have to explore, they have to be curious for a minute. Like, what is it about me that is making me so phobic about this other lifestyle, rather than just immediately saying, see, they're mean people. They insult me, they call me a naughty name, and then they go about putting all this stuff in my face. It's got to start somewhere. When two people are in a conflict, we always hear the people, why should I be the first one to talk? Because you can.
Somebody's got to.
Yeah, somebody's got to. And we feel, if this wants to give you a little bit of a challenge here, that if you are the first one to talk, that's showing that you have sort of developed some coping skills that other people don't have. So something to keep in mind, we say this all the time, but hate, shame, coercion, condescension, those things don't change minds. They don't change behaviors. They really don't. So this is a lot of the way these problems are handled and why they continue to be taboo subjects. Or it's because sometimes it's the way it's called out, not just the fact that it should be called out.
That's very true.
So something to consider. There's a balance on both sides.
There is. So as Todd was saying, it's become a pretty normalized pattern to call people out. So what happens is being checked feels exactly the same as feeling shamed. So if someone offers any kind of correction to what you're doing, the immediate response that's become so normalized is, how dare you? I feel personally attacked, instead of maybe someone's just trying to identify that there's a better way to do something, or maybe, hey, Carolsue, I'm not sure if you realize that the way you're saying that's coming off a little offensive. And instead of me being concerned about offending someone, I immediately decide to be offended, which just makes it harder for this conversation to continue. And it also teaches people not to tell me these kind of things about myself.
Exactly. And with your expressions, even, you can indirectly shame another person.
You can. So as a result, problems that everybody secretly, privately in our own brains, we all know they're there, we suddenly feel like we can't talk about them. And so they just persist and no one's allowed to fix them.
Yeah. Blaming the messenger is a big deal. I've actually had situations where, like, the supervisors that I brought up, in a lot of cases, what we would label as toxic. And I remember one situation where I got snapped at by a supervisor, and I boldly said, I said, you know, getting angry at me doesn't make the problem go away. And that person was very uncomfortable with that.
Mind blown.
Yeah, and I'm not affected by shame. I was in the military. I've had people spitting in my face while they're yelling at me, so... You know, some supervisor snapping because their feelings are hurt because I'm bringing something to their attention that pretty much everybody else already knows is getting angry because I just said it out loud. That's the only difference.
So what ends up happening is that raising an issue, even if everybody else in the room is aware of that issue being present, turns the negative attention to the messenger. And then we lose an opportunity to have a really open conversation and actually fix a problem that we're all having.
Yeah, fix a problem. And that's the thing that I'm always talking about. And I mentioned it in the book. It's interesting with human behavior. If we're working on something, we will get the right tool. And if that tool doesn't work, without frustration, without frustration, without slamming anything, we're like, this is the wrong size, whatever, wrong size screwdriver, wrong size wrench, wrong paintbrush, whatever it is that you're doing. We don't hesitate to get a better tool. But here we're saying that shaming hurts. It never does any good. And people will walk away going, well, what else am I supposed to do? That's not the question. I mean, well, that is a good question to ask, but not as a justification for continuing the shame.
That's right.
And because our answer is always going to be, well, not that. So find something else. But in spite of the fact that we're telling you, shame is actually problematic, especially for parents. You have to find an alternative way to communicate. People will still continue to do it and still wonder why it's not working.
It's not working.
Yeah. Even after we told them, because we are constantly reinforced for these bad behaviors. We're constantly reinforced with this poor communication style. You see it in movies, you see it around you. You could go to work. Those of you that have been sticking with us on the podcast have probably gone to work now and see things you've never seen before, and to a certain degree we want to apologize for it. We're sorry, because you can't unsee a lot of this stuff, and it's very, very interesting.
So let's talk a little bit about the lie itself, and here it is in plain language. Naming a problem is considered the same as creating a problem.
Yeah, and I gave a little example on a previous show. It's like the person blasting the music in the apartment complex at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and you go over there, and no matter how kind you are, like, hey, I'm really trying to get some sleep. Can you lower the music? And they're like, what's your problem, man? We're just having a party up. We're trying to celebrate. We're having a good time. Why are you spoiling it? And it's just like I said before, my argument is, I need sleep to survive, and you don't need loud music, so I should win this argument. And they should go, yeah, you're right, and shut the music down. That would be like the
Isn't that always the way it happens?
the social utopia. So we have a basic model for that, but it extends into everything else, like you just said.
Yeah. So the problem was already there, out loud. We knew it. We all knew it. But the person naming it is just the first person who's had the courage to say it out loud. And this is a pivotal moment where we all have a choice to either target the person who named it, because now we all have to be uncomfortable out loud, or use this as an opportunity to walk through the door and actually have an open discussion about the issue.
Yeah, now that I look at this stuff and the more research we do, I remember I was in a meeting when I was in the Navy, and I was calling out these statistics, and I was working in what we called a hybrid work center, and that means there was civilians and military in there, and I was showing how just statistics on how the military output was higher than the civilian output. And one of the civilians got very offended and called me an a-hole in the middle of the meeting, and I go, okay, your opinion is noted, but is my data incorrect? And everybody was just complete silence. Even then, I maybe had a little CIT in me, knowing that his basic insult to me, calling me a poopy head in the middle of a meeting in front of everybody, really had no bearing. And I knew that person was just very defensive about the data, but it needed to be fixed. There was problematic issues, even where the civilians were telling the military, hey, you need to slow down because you're making us look bad. Which is another one of my things that, like, as soon as I hear it, like, I ain't making you look like anything. You're doing that all by yourself. And I would say that's probably the ASD being masked in a little bit of sarcasm back in the day, but those were my military responses for those kind of things.
I always appreciate them when they slip out every once in a while. I just gotta tell you, I know it's not your favorite, but
because they're programmed in me now as a response for that kind of thing. But you're right. At least I'm more tactful now.
That's true.
Like, it would be more of in the military sense, especially as a chief, and these are other chiefs saying that. I don't have a problem
calling it out.
Back in the day. But now I would say, look, I'm really not trying to make you look bad or anything. I have a lot of energy.
Yeah. We've identified that the issue we've seen is that the person who identifies the problem then becomes the target or the problem. Instead of us working on the issue at hand, we start to all focus on the person who brought it up because it's uncovered something uncomfortable.
Just like you're making us look bad.
Exactly.
Yeah, they could have minded their own business and let me
right.
keep walking past them while they're sitting on their butts on the floor. Never mind. Anyway, I'm
so
joking.
If you've ever been the person to do this, to take a leap forward and say, hey, I don't know if we're all feeling it, but there's a really negative energy in this room here today. And you may have heard some of these responses, things like, God, you're being negative. Why did you have to bring that up? We're all just trying to get this work done. Can't you just let it go? You're making things weird.
I've heard that a lot. Like, can't you just let it go? I'm like, no, this is hurting people.
Yeah. So some of us may have experienced that from time to time when we're the ones who are bold enough to say, hey, I'm noticing, and I'm not sure if you guys are noticing it, but here's this issue. And that's how you might see it.
Yeah, and a lot of times I've had people say you're making it weird, but I usually attribute that to the spectrum disorder. I'm like, yeah, I know, I do that.
That's true.
Yeah, so it's sort of funny. But the main thing we want to say, one, is that you're very brave and bold for bringing these things up, and we commend you when you're trying. But also we want to add the variable and the context. We still want to say you do have to assess the audience and you have to assess the environment. Mm-hmm. It's not a good time to call your boss out when something's wrong.
True.
In a staff
meeting. In a group setting,
Yeah, in a group setting. That's not the time to do it because they have to maintain their credibility. So they're not going to go ahead and give in front of everybody in that moment. And a lot of times these are sort of complex issues. They're being hidden or they're being covered up in some capacity. There's probably a lot more under it that we may not be aware of. So that's not the place to call it out. So that's something you'd want to do one-on-one. can. You don't want to slam somebody with hardcore information in the middle of a passionate moment.
Yeah.
That's not going to be helpful. So creating that receptivity, building that prep, like we said, using the tools that we've talked about to get them to want your message.
Yes.
Take the time to do that. And I know there's a lot of people, and I've heard it a lot of times, why should I have to be the one? And you have to ask yourself, the reason you should be the one is because you know these tools now. And you also know that society is holding everybody else back. You also know that people's communication skills are only good as their education and exposure prior to coming into that room. And you have new skills. In some cases, they're impressive. And people are going to get defensive just because you're seeing something that other people don't. So there's a lot of variables to work with when it comes to raising the truth in these kind of environments, and something to keep in mind because you have to remember you're sort of disrupting a culture. You're disrupting a flow. So take the time to find the best way to get your point out there. Because like I said, you want to reduce the opposition before it even happens.
And we're just guessing that if you have stayed with our podcast for all of these episodes, then you are already our people. You are the people who have been wondering, why is this so challenging?
Exactly.
And how can we move these conversations forward? And how are we ever going to solve issues if we're never going to name them? So we're guessing that you're the ones who are right here with us going, somehow the problem or the obligation always seems to fall to me. It's true. So we want to give you the tools to make sure you can do it as effectively as possible, because we already are betting that you guys are the folks out there just like us who just want to get past the wrong way to handle things and actually find solutions to the problems we all seem to keep having.
We look for like the dents in people's heads where they've been banging their head against the wall. So we're like, hey, you probably want to talk to us for a little bit. We have some solutions.
We have
for
those
you.
dents. We have those dents as well.
Too. Yeah. So how the lie shows up in real life. All right. So we're going to give you some practical applications, and we've actually brought up a couple of these in previous shows. So we're going to touch on them mildly, but let's talk about a few of the things that contribute to the lie and how you see it in real life. So we spent some time when we were working on the script to identify the most common elements that most people are exposed to. And one of the things is bias that a lot of people aren't aware of, depending upon the researchers, the scientists, and there's so many different fields that are actually studying this. I mean, it's psychology, it's communication, it's counseling, even neurology, how people perceive certain situations. So biases are a really big deal. And biases are things that influence the way we think, the way we process information, the way we provide information. Scientists, depending upon what resource you're using at the time, is between 150 and 200 biases.
Wild.
These are 150 and 200 factors that contribute to your information not being 100% accurate. And when you think about it, a fact is always based on data.
Yep.
And then sometimes that data has bias built into that. And one of the most basic biases that we all probably engage in some time or another is confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is simply that when we have an idea or an opinion, we only look for people that support that.
That's right.
And we completely find ways to disregard information that we don't like.
Yeah.
We also talked about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And we actually wrote a whole book on that with the knowledge insecurity loop. In the knowledge insecurity loop, I talk about how in the Dunning-Kruger effect is people think they're much smarter than they actually are about a certain topic. And those that are actually experts doubt themselves because that's what experts do. When you are researching a particular piece of information, you find out that there's a lot more information out there.
Yes.
And it's impossible to consume all the information that you would need to be the supreme expert of anything, because literally after you read that book, it's probably outdated.
That's
true.
true.
I mean, especially if you're dealing with current studies. And then an expansion of that is the overconfidence effect. And the overconfidence effect is another bias where we just believe that our information is right and we're just confident about it and we don't pursue any kind of other alternatives. A belief bias is once we judge something that's logical, then we maintain that belief, pretty much just make the idea that if we believe it, then it must be true. And we focus on that.
We do.
And then the last one is one we're seeing quite a bit is called the backfire effect. And the backfire effect is when you think you know something, for some reason feel really protective of, and you want that information to be true, you need it to be true, that you now dig in. Like you look for ways to fight the person who's giving you alternative information, even if their information is correct and yours is wrong.
Yes.
And there was one last concept that made me think about all this, is that what we call the scientific method. You form a hypothesis and then you try to disprove it. That was literally what I was taught as a kid. And I thought that was so profound that we don't do anything even close to that. It's like, how dare you try to prove my
Challenge that,
hypothesis wrong, which I think overall socially is really hurting us because what's happening, like I said before, the loudest, most insecure people are influencing the people that are more comfortable, more at ease with their information, and don't feel the need to force other people to believe it also. It's causing a disruption with these people. It's like they have to second guess themselves, or what if I say the wrong thing? I'm going to get beat on or yelled at because
Rejected or something.
Rejected is probably the best perspective to provoke that kind of fear. But we should be looking for challenges like that. That's what growth is learning, educating yourself. We need to get back to normalizing non-emotional conflict. We need to get back to a statement that probably nobody's said in a long time, and that's, I don't agree with you, but I find your topic interesting. Now,
I like that.
Yeah, wouldn't that be some kind of social mind-blowing cultural shift if we could do that?
So that's really just the tip of the iceberg on confirmation biases. And if you found that interesting, as some of us generally do, then you can find tons of research on it. There are literally, as Todd said, hundreds of biases. And we bring this example to you because we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves a reminder to remain open, that the things that we feel most sure about might not be right, and that's okay. And the best thing we can all do as we're trying to have more productive communication with each other is just to keep your mind open, that even if you think you're really, really sure about it, we want to just at least keep a window open for new insight to come in. Because more often than not, our information, as sure as we are about it, could use a little upgrading.
So just a few practical examples of what we're talking about, like say in a work meeting. Why when a coworker brings up something to the boss, that it's okay for the boss to put that person down, right? In a public setting. You know? And that's because when those things come out, an insecure supervisor would feel like they're being exposed. And then of course, there's also this underlying mentality that certain people in certain positions have what we call a superiority complex. And that's scalar. Sometimes it's real obvious, extreme arrogance, narcissism and stuff like that. There's a certain motivation to be a little bit better, whatever that may be, than the next person. Like we always feel that need to top other people, or
That's true.
It's very strange that superiority complex, I believe, if we trace it back, comes from that kind of punishment, extreme punishment as a kid. That right there is a perfect example of a superior, being the adult or the parent, basically bullying their child into certain behaviors with shame, punishment, coercion, whatever it may be. So we developed that model. That if you don't like what the inferior person is saying, then you can beat them down or bully them, you know, and that happens on different scales, different levels, different styles, communication or physical. It's still one person having to assert that they're superior in some capacity. And that goes back to like the bar thing, bringing up my team. And, and I don't watch sports, so I don't have a team. But anyways, why would that offend you that my favorite is different than your favorite? When you talk about it like this, it's sort of absurd.
It seems rather silly. Yes. So another way this shows up is, let's say that a supervisor makes a crass or sexist joke in a meeting. Why is it that a woman can't say out loud in this scenario, I came across a little sexist, without becoming the target or the disruption in the room? Oh, why did you have to say that? Why did you have to call that out? So instead of wanting to address the issue, we feel compelled to protect the offender in that moment.
And that's so weird. And everybody in the room can agree. Instead of preserving the dignity of the person who just got insulted, you're taking it too seriously, or you're being too sensitive in the moment. And that's not the case. I mean, these sexist perspectives create a lot of other mentalities.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of other behaviors.
Some of which are very dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the kind of stuff, when you see it come out of somebody, it makes you question, well, what else do they do?
Yes.
You know, what else do they feel about the other sex that's inappropriate?
So why is it that we can't just walk into a boss's office and say, hey, we all just left that meeting together. You made a comment in there that came across as a little bit dismissive, and expect that your boss might say, oh, yikes, I didn't realize that. Thanks for letting me know that.
That would be my utopian society.
It's your whole dream.
Man, I'm sorry. You know, I didn't even think about that. You're right.
Instead, how often does it happen that the boss decides, well, I'm going to dismiss this feedback because this person reports to me and they are inferior to me, so I don't have to listen to what they say.
Yeah.
Instead of just acknowledging that their perception might have been incorrect and they may have offended someone.
Like say you're having a cookout or a family gathering. Why are there taboo subjects? Why is everybody whispering about Uncle John over in the corner, but they're not talking to Uncle John about his behavior? You know, those kind of things they're rampant.
Yes, they're very common.
And you have to think about the model that you're reinforcing, but also what you are performing in front of kids. What do they see? We don't talk about that, or that's just how he is. those could be really inappropriate things to teach a child and to continue perpetuating within the family unit.
Yeah, and it robs us of the opportunity to have a maybe slightly uncomfortable, but ultimately really healthy conversation about how we can deal with these uncomfortable issues. So we lose that opportunity there.
We want to ask ourselves, why are these things so hard to see, and why is it still allowed to go on? And interestingly enough, with our Finding Your Honest Voice, technically it's our second book, because what we started with was a leadership book.
Oh, that's true.
Interestingly enough, the original title of the generational leadership book was Normalized Dysfunction.
Yep.
And that's when I was thinking about how toxic the environment was of where we were working at the time and how nobody saw it. And that's why the lie sticks, is because nobody really is looking at it as a lie. And a lot of these things come from good people, you know? I mean,
absolutely.
We are programmed a certain way, and this is how we will act in public situations because there's just no opposition to what we're saying. Like we don't know that what we're doing is wrong until somebody points out that it's wrong. There's a lot of people that want that, but then again, that's where it starts to become normalized, is because people start making comments like, that's just how they are, or, leave them be, don't cause a ruckus.
They're not bothering anybody.
Yeah, they're not bothering anybody. And that's what makes you start feeling like addressing the lie is the wrong thing to do. And that's a subtle training, but it gets reinforced from so many different angles.
It so does.
Our whole job here is to try to shift that. We want to, rather than commend the person who is continuing in this poor behavior, we want to start changing the dialogue to be the people that are bringing up a way to improve as being the virtuous act, not keeping the peace.
Right.
So we want to shift society's perspective that it's actually cool to be like, you know what? I know exactly where you're coming from, but this is actually some better information or some newer information, or this will help you understand it better. And people not get offended by that.
If we're able to normalize the practice of identifying where something is inappropriate or incorrect, if we're able to do it in a calm manner early on, then what we avoid are those big blow-ups where, let's say I've been sitting in meetings at work for a long time hearing little sexist jabs here and there, and then by the time I finally get ready to address it, I'm really emotionally invested in it. So I'm frustrated and maybe I bark it louder than I mean to.
But also that comes out because you feel that it's wrong to address it.
That's
because
true.
You've been made to feel that it's
That's
wrong
true.
when it's the right thing to do.
I appreciate that. Thank you. But the reason it's taken me so long to address it is because I've been taught in some way or another that I can't speak about it.
Yeah,
so
it's programming.
Our whole goal in helping us normalize this is so that when we're introducing new information, we're doing it in a very calm, respectful, just normal, casual way so that it doesn't come across as this big offensive challenge of everything I think I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's reinforced just by how you say something honest and somebody reacts with a loud voice.
Yes.
And makes you feel like you've done something wrong. So just the simple idea of saying, hey, I appreciate that input, and saying, why are you being so disruptive right now with that authoritative voice?
Right.
It creates this subconscious idea like, oh, I'm bad. I did something wrong. And that's why people push that tone. That's why people perform aggression, which we're going to be talking about in the next episode.
Yes.
Now, because we wanted to break up the two anger episodes.
So there's a lot of behaviors and unspoken rules that reinforce this lie that we shouldn't be able to identify when someone's behavior is wrong.
And that was the loud voice thing I brought up.
That's right. Exactly.
And some other examples.
Yeah. So a vocal enough group repeats this lie until it sounds like consensus. So if I bring up something uncomfortable and a coworker says, "Oh, why are you talking about that right now?"
Or three coworkers come up.
Exactly. And that validates the other coworkers' feelings of, yeah, I don't like this either, so I'm going to jump on this bandwagon, which just further stops me from feeling like I can speak out. And that's how this behavior continues. So it's very common for these lies to just go on for generations and generations in families, in friend groups, in workplaces. Here's the cost. The cost is that the real issues that we're all feeling and experiencing and struggling with go unaddressed, when a simple, honest conversation might be able to actually find a solution. So you might be losing people in that workplace because you just refuse to have the honest conversation about what's happening, even though we all know it's happening.
Yeah. The interesting thing, there's no communication, then those feelings aren't even communicated.
That's right. So then resentment builds in private.
Exactly.
Then we all sit and dread going to work and sit in our cubicles or in our offices and don't interact with each other because we're just trying to keep our sanity for 8 or 10 or 12 hours in the day.
This kind of thing creates superficial bonds. Like because you're lying and because you're performing all the time, there's no real camaraderie or anything like that. And I've seen the big bosses at the top, well, let's have a cookout, or let's have a team picnic, or let's have something like that. I mean, that's my experience. And I've told supervisors, those are great if you already have teams.
Right.
But you don't have camaraderie. You don't
have cohesion yet.
Yeah. And those venues do not make them come together.
No.
It's just they eat and they go back to their different corners. But those are the kind of things to celebrate the teamwork, to celebrate the camaraderie, to get together where people are interacting. In my case, when I used to work there, it became mandatory. So when I would go there, I would see people. It's like, what would be embarrassing for a boss is to create the idea of the picnic and nobody shows up. So it became mandatory. And I saw it just was the cliques. It was the same cliques.
Exactly. You go.
That would just gather together.
Yes.
And they would ignore each other just like they do in the workplace. And it did not contribute to cohesion.
Nope. So then what happens is that our relationships become performances. And if you're working in any kind of field that serves the public and all you have with your coworkers is a superficial performance, then chances are your clients, your patients, your public is going to suffer because your customers, good job, because your team's not working together.
All right, now we're going to get into the tools.
Yes.
This is good stuff.
How we fix it. So when someone says something that provokes anger, shame, or hurt, we want you to ask yourself 2 questions before you react to that feeling.
When I look at our previous episodes and things like that, I think this is probably one of the most important tools for changing your perspective on being defensive, on being offended by just words, and things like that. So I am listening intently.
First, we're going to use the pause that we've already talked about. This is how this is how we're going to have that break between our initial reaction and our responses. We're going to use this pause. We're going to ask the 2 questions that, not to be overdramatic here, but could actually change your life. What is question number 1?
Question number 1 is, why is this information provoking this response? These are just words. They're not physically being created, and I'm not being hit with them. So there's no physical attribute. So whatever is provoking these particular emotions from these words is something that I'm doing internal. In my mind. Yeah, it's the thing that I am. That is where my belief, like we said before, the words are the antecedent event. And this is the belief I'm creating about these words. And why are they creating discomfort in me? That is the first question.
That's right. And the second question is, if this wasn't provoking an emotional response from me, would the information attached to this message be helpful to me?
Yeah, and I've actually used this with clients before. I've said, okay, you don't like what I'm saying right now. Is it helpful?
And here's the good news. When we recommend that you start by asking yourself, why am I having this emotional response? We don't need you to go into a therapist's office and just lay on a couch for an hour and do a deep dive into the depths of your soul and why you're having these emotions. In my case, I do sometimes still tend to have defensive reactions from time to time. What I'll just do is identify that's what it is and shove it to the side for a minute.
Yeah.
And try to receive the information and clean up the rest of that stuff later. Because I don't want to stop the conversation. Well, hold on. I have to figure out why I'm hurt by this. I'll come back to you in 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. They're just words.
They're just words.
It's data.
It's
Calm myself down.
That's right.
So this is the reason we want you to ask these questions, because this is the effect it has on you. The first thing they do is they separate that emotion from the information. And that's what we want everyone to do. It's like there is no reason that a series of words or being called a poopy head should make you angry. It's just information. It's just data. And they should not be provoking an emotional response. And we keep saying should not because you don't realize how allowing that to go on feeds into a lot of your other behavior.
Yeah.
If you do it there, you'll do it with your kids. If you don't like what they said, you'll snap at them before actually finding out where it came from. I mean, I have been misunderstood and got punished for that misunderstanding while they're telling me what they were hearing and me trying to say, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. That's the kind of thing we're trying to help you avoid.
Yeah. So this takes us from a defensive place where we can't receive the information and moves it into a curiosity place instead, which is more productive. And it gives you a moment to make that choice that this lie, the lie that we can't talk about hard things, has been taking away from you.
Yeah. Most of the time when it does offend you, then it's probably because the information has some merit.
Yep.
Yeah. It's probably because it touches a nerve of something that embarrasses you because of your programming.
Yes.
Once again, because someone has shamed you with that same information or has hurt you with that information in some capacity. So it's coming from there. Once again, even these feelings that you're having, they're not your fault. One thing that we say in mental health is feelings are acknowledged, but the behavior is, if it's not acceptable, it's not acceptable.
That's
so
right.
we all have the control. We have the choice to control our behavior regardless of the information. But through training, we escalate it so high that we become irrational.
Yeah.
And we think that's a reason that we can act a certain way that really does hurt people.
Yep, absolutely right. So what happens on the other side of the lie? Once we figured out how to not just keep quiet about things that are causing damage in our relationships or our workplaces, let's talk about what happens when we get on the other side of that.
So just like what you're witnessing here, this is the model that we are setting right now. We're giving you information that is disruptive. Every video that we've done so far, every podcast that we've done has the potential to offend somebody. And we are not a podcast of calling it out and saying you need to get in line, quit treating people poorly, quit acting stupid, quit defending yourself when you should be engaging in some kind of kind communication. There's so much baggage behind all that stuff. There's no way that that could be an effective pursuit of trying to change human behavior. And this is all about promoting an honest voice. You know, I don't mean to do product placement here.
It's hard not to.
Yeah. But I mean, that title came from a very real place.
It did.
We want you to be able to use the voice that you have in an honest fashion so you can live comfortably. And as you can see, this takes time. It takes work to get this podcast going. It takes editing. It takes building a script. It takes research. And the reason we're doing that is because we're confident about the information that we have. And we are also confident that it can help a lot of people.
Yeah.
So this is what we're asking you to do. We're trying to model this behavior for you, and we're asking you to do the same thing. If you feel the truth is important, find a way to get that truth inserted into all this chaos.
Yes, absolutely. So the way this shows up for us is that in our relationship, all topics are welcome.
That's true.
I have to give the disclaimer that this was hard for me at first.
Yeah, me too.
But it's been critical because it means that both of us feel safe to address an issue because we've already set the guidelines that we're going to hear each other out. We're going to communicate in a way that's not accusatory or inflammatory. We're going to make sure that we're calm when we bring the topic. And then the other person has committed to keeping an open mind and listening to the feedback as neutrally as possible, asking questions for clarity. But this gives us the space to be able to address something that is tiny so that it doesn't even become an issue.
Yeah, and that's the key. Most of this stuff that is based on lies, it's cumulative over time. Reliving that lie, dealing with that lie, hearing that lie again, getting frustrated about that lie. That's where it becomes cumulative, and that's where these basically asocial behaviors rise. We build up, we lash out. We lash out, the person fights back. All these things, the escalation part is what contributes to behaviors on both sides. So there's certain things both of us need to do as the giver of information who has that moment and the receiver of that information. We both have skills that we have to engage in when it's sensitive subjects. So as the giver, we need to learn about prep. We need to learn about saying this is going to be a sensitive subject. Is this a good time?
Yes.
That's just the person that's delivering it. The person on the other side says, I need to put my emotions aside and listen to this person. I need to contribute to a welcoming environment so I don't shut this person down.
Yeah.
So there are skills that both of us have to introduce, and see, that's a great picture of the mix. Once you can develop these skills on both sides, that's where your whole environment starts becoming more interactive and more peaceful.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
Yeah. It's little things, but the honesty has to go both ways and it has to be consistent. So Todd may have an issue that he wants to talk about now that he's retired and he's working from home. He might want to talk about it when I get home. And Todd being Todd, he'll give me a little time to unwind, but he may not know yet that I just came off of a really frustrating meeting. So he comes to me and says, hey, I wanted to give you a little time to decompress, but there's something I need to talk about. Now it's my responsibility to be honest and say, honey, I need just a little time to decompress. The last meeting.
A little extra time.
A little extra
maybe.
time. Yeah. The last meeting of the day was really stressful and I really just need to shake it off, but I want to hear what you have to say. So can I have about 15, 20 more minutes just to drink some tea or take a walk or something, and then we can talk about it.
You know, that particular behavior right there came from the reality of a problem.
Yeah.
Where I may have jumped up as soon as you walked in the door and I blindsided you with a bunch of information, and you were like, you know, sometimes I can't take that in at the moment. So this is growth. This is where growth comes. I know these prep behaviors because I listened to Carolsue when I tried to give information and she was bothered by it. And these are things that just, when you work on them together, they just bring you down.
Yeah.
And you just keep, and I mean this in a good way.
Right.
They just reduce escalation.
Yep.
Yeah. And it just takes learning each other on both sides to introduce those variables that make it a safe and communicative environment.
Yeah. But the commitment that you have to make, especially in your most important relationships, is that you won't stop being proactively honest, because sometimes those variables change. And Todd may think, oh, well, I want to give her about a half an hour after she gets home from work before I address something. But then maybe in my brain, I'm thinking, I didn't think there was anything to talk about. Now I'm super relaxed and I don't want to have a conversation about this issue right now. So we have to just keep the honesty going. So
Yeah.
what Todd's really good about is saying, hey, there's something I want us to talk about, and I don't want it to be upsetting and I don't want it to be stressful, but I just want to share this with you. And that's his prep so that I can then prepare myself and make sure I'm in a good space to move forward with this conversation. But I also have the opportunity, if I'm not, to say, is this something we really need to talk about right now? Or could we look at maybe a conversation this weekend when there's not a lot going on?
Yeah. And once again, because of the trust that's been built, it may be a negotiation in that moment.
Yeah.
It may be really pressing for me.
Yes.
And like, I'm really sorry, sweetie, this is important.
Yeah.
So if we can find a way to let me sort of slide it in there so we can get it done, or say, that's no problem, we can talk about this tomorrow. So this is the trust, the relationship, and the environment that we have built over time. And when you start working on these things, you realize everything that we've been talking about in these videos goes away. Honesty doesn't feel risky anymore. Correction of any kind doesn't feel like you were rejected or insulted in any capacity. When these things pop up in our learning, and one of the things that I learned when Carolsue and I were working on this, we had a lot of prep. We would almost give like a half hour, hey, I'm sorry, and go into
this doesn't offend you.
Yeah, and to the point where we'd forget what we were actually going to talk about.
Right.
It wasn't that bad.
Never mind.
Yeah. But that's what happens over time. And one time I figured it out. Carolsue was giving me a lot of prep, and I was like, you know what? I already know what's in your heart. I know you aren't sarcastic. You're not condescending. You don't try to put me down in any capacity. So basically I said, if I know what's in your heart, then if I take it wrong, my first assumption is going to be that's me. There's something in me right now that is filtering that to make me think this is offensive, but that's not her intent at all. And that's where we started learning how this stuff would actually scrape away the barriers to where everything was starting to become more and more comfortable. So now on her side, she doesn't have to prep anymore. And that's why I was saying these things come down. The stuff that was put on us, the defensiveness, the opposition, the protection of things that we don't need to protect, just started dissipating to where it's just simple communication now. It'd be the simple thing like, hey, can you call me a little more sometimes, or text me a little more during your work day? I know you're busy, but you have to use the bathroom sometime. And it's a joke. It's funny. If I were to really say that, I don't know if we mentioned this in one of our previous episodes, but like there was this situation with our coat hooks. And and I will tell you that I am the typical male when it comes to if it's not on the top shelf in the front.
I can't find it.
Carolsue makes me lunch sometimes, and she doesn't put it exactly where it goes. Not where it goes, where I expect it. I'm sorry, I corrected myself right there. Where I expect it. But I have learned to look better.
And I have learned to sometimes, if I think it's going to be complicated, I will walk him into the kitchen and say, come in here.
That's true, yeah.
Because he learns in pictures and he remembers things in pictures. So knowing that about him helps me be helpful.
Yeah, so the coat hook thing was I used the right end coat hook. And Carolsue didn't know that was a thing because we never talked about it before. And one time she put her coat over my raincoat and I could not find my raincoat. Like I went into the closet and I looked in the coat closet, wasn't on the coat hook. There were 5 coats, mostly Carolsue's coats.
We should also clarify there are seriously 11. I think there are 11 other coat hooks. So that one wasn't the only one or even the best one that I just needed to put my coat on in that moment.
Yeah, but then we sound like Chip and Dale again.
Right.
Is that in your defense, you're the only one that leaves the apartment. So you're the only one that uses coats. I just use one when I'm taking the dog out.
Right.
But so she came home and I said, hey, I need to ask you a question. If you could help me with this, may I have the last 2 hooks on our 8 coat rack?
And for those of you who are listening and not watching, Todd did this very dramatic, just one coat hook, and went over to the coat hook and did this big demonstration.
Like this one.
It's overly
right
theatrical
here.
thing so that it became funny.
Yeah.
Instead of in any way, because he knows that sometimes I have a shame trigger that's pretty easy to trip. So he made it overly comical and overly theatrical. I just am asking for one coat hook.
I mean, I bought the coat hooks. Can't I just use?
I built the coat hooks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's our level of conflict in the household right now.
Yeah.
But the typical, I'm sure I've said it before. You may have said it before. It's like, do you have to use all the hooks? Like, can't you just put them somewhere? Coat closet's 5 feet away.
Right.
That is a normal conversation.
It is.
But it's just so unnecessary.
Yeah. And so now instead I'm left with an anecdote that every time I put a coat on a coat hook, it makes me giggle because I remember him doing his big theatrical demonstration of how all he was asking for, ma'am, is just one coat hook.
Just want one coat hook.
All right. So a little bit of reflection for us this week. This was a lot of new information.
Yeah, we're wrapping up now.
We're really excited about this.
Yes.
Thanks for staying with us. So for us this week, what is something that you privately agree is a problem in one of your relationships, but you feel you can't bring it up?
Yeah, and then consider why you can't bring it up. What would happen if you brought it up?
Exactly. And who are you protecting by being silent about it, and what's the cost?
Yeah, one of the things that I advise a lot of people is, even if you're not initiated into our style of communication, try the prep. You're going to have to use it on your style right now, meaning you probably have to add a lot more words than what we have been identifying. But say you have somebody, which is really common in a lot of relationships, an explosive individual when you try to give them news that they don't like to hear. You know, like you get the typical, I just got home from work, or like, why are you always pointing out what's wrong with me?
What is it now?
Yeah, and you think you're so perfect. What about you? Those kind of things. So the prep is, I really need to talk to you about this particular subject, and I'm afraid. And like we always say, if you can phrase it into I statements and request help with it, rather than just tell the person what's wrong with them, what they do every time you try to bring it up, this can be a little bit helpful, indoctrinating into being more truthful and being more open, and saying, I'm afraid to bring it up because I don't want to make you angry, instead of you always get angry.
Yes.
I don't want to make you angry, and normalize it a little bit right now just for receptivity. So use those I statements. But when you get angry, we don't get to solve anything. And I really think we could work together on this and just get through it. So bear with me. And if you start feeling frustrated while we're talking about it, let's take a break. But we have to get through this.
Yes.
Just getting angry, going into our separate corners and sleeping on the couch doesn't fix anything. And it's something I'm very concerned about. So please bear with me. That was a lot of dialogue, but that's how it starts. And like I said before, a very typical feedback that I've heard when I've given this advice is, why do I have to do all that? But you got to ask what you want.
It's true.
Do you want to bridge this gap, or do you want to just keep making that person feel responsible for the problems that you have in your household?
And though it may be a lot of prep in the beginning, as you move forward, you get to a place where we are, where sometimes there's kind of humorous prep, or just a little bit of prep if it's something heavy. But for the most part, we've got unspoken rules now where we know that if he says to me, hey, it seemed like you were a little bit frustrated when I was trying to talk to you, and instead of getting embarrassed, I'll go, tell me about that, so that he can give me a little more feedback. So it does get easier over time, but practice is absolutely the key, just to make it more comfortable and more natural.
Yeah, and I'll be the first one to say, and you've heard me say this, is like, is something bothering you right now? And you'll say, I don't know, what he's seeing right now. And I'm like, I'll be the first to say, I'm either seeing it or imagining it, but I'm going to share it with you. So I will consider that it might be a sensitivity that I'm filtering through right now and projecting on Carolsue. That exists. That's another bias. Projection is a big bias, which I see used in that dysfunctional environment. There was a lot of projection. It's like, why are you acting so rude right now? It's like, you're the only one being rude at the moment. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Hold on, let me get this mirror so I can solve your problem for you.
Yeah, just like that one supervisor, constantly insecure, constantly on the defensive. And they would insult you, be like, oh, you must be having a bad day. It's like, no, I wasn't. Obviously you are, though. And you can't say that. But it's like, I didn't do anything wrong, just because when you came in the room, I didn't go, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for coming by. You're my favorite person to see. I got a little high there. But that's what they were interpreting, because they were defensive about the information that they were going to tell you in the moment. That they knew you probably won't be happy with because of the information and their delivery in the moment, I'm sure. They could put the blame on you if anything got out of hand after that.
Exactly.
So this week, with the tips that Carolsue just gave you, when you feel that emotional response, stop. Ask yourself, what is it about this information that's provoking this emotional response in the moment? Try to figure out, what is it that is making you feel this way? And honestly, proactively think of another way you could look at it. Just like I said, with the feeling that I've got where I asked Carolsue, is something bothering you right now? I consider the fact that it's me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So be okay with that. So when you don't feel right about something, think, am I being too sensitive about this? And what is another way I could perceive this in the moment? Just like if a person's being rude, we talked about verbal de-escalation. My thoughts are always, this person's suffering, rather than, how dare them talk to me that way? Who the heck do they think they are?
Exactly right. So as you have time to ponder this week and think through conversations you're either having or avoiding with important people in your life, you'll find that this one lie, the lie that bringing up the problem makes you a problem, this lie is what is keeping that behavior going. And we just encourage you to take small steps to try to correct that in the relationships that matter most to you.
Every kind of problematic issue that you can identify in your relationship is probably something that's downstream from this kind of lie.
Yeah.
The fact that you weren't addressing it somewhere earlier is what made it get out of hand.
Exactly. So we want to thank you for sticking with us today. This is, we think, of course, a very interesting topic, but there's a lot to it. So we appreciate you coming with us on this. And next episode, we're going to talk about one of the ways that these lies shows up most clearly, which is in performative anger.
Performative anger. Yeah. And this is something as a domestic violence prevention and awareness trainer that I learned about. And that's in the extreme situations, whoever the aggressor is will keep that identification of explosive anger when they don't like something in the air, in the environment. So you have to think every time you talk, should I even say anything? Because they're going to get mad. And that anger that they're presenting in that moment is literally to make you feel that way. When it comes to those situations, it's not anger management that helps, because this is a calculated behavior. This is a behavior.
Choice.
Yeah, it's a choice. It's literally a proactive, this is what I'm going to do to make sure they shut up and not challenge me.
Yeah, it's more than a choice. It's a strategy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's a strategy. So we're going to talk more about that next time. And this is the reason we laid out these episodes, is because we wanted you to develop these coping skills. We wanted you to understand different communication styles, dysfunctional communication styles. We wanted to show you how differently men and women talk. And now we're going to start getting into things. We wanted you to build up your solid foundation where you can receive this information and realize that having an emotional response to what's about to get very detailed, it's about to get real in here. This very detailed information to build up some resistance to being intimidated by it.
Yeah.
To understand that it's an act and it's literally to manipulate your behavior. So we're going to be going deep into that next time.
Yeah. So if you haven't had time to go back and check out some of our previous episodes, please do so. They'll help you just be ready to hear the information we're going to talk about next week. And as always, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes. Thank you so much. We had a lot of fun doing this one and working on this script. So thank you.
Yes. Have a great day and a great week.
See you next time.